In March 2021, a man in Queens, New York bought a printer at Walmart. It cost him less than $40. It was advertised as an all-in-one device: print, scan, fax. He needed it to scan documents. He did not need to print anything. He did not need to fax anything. He needed to scan. When he tried, the machine refused, not because the scanner was broken, not because of a software error. The scanner worked perfectly. The machine refused because the ink cartridges were empty, and Canon had deliberately programmed it that way. Within weeks, a $5 million class action lawsuit had been filed. Within 2 years, a second lawsuit followed. And the ink inside that $40 printer? Up to $2,300 per liter. More expensive than Dom Perignon. More expensive than beluga caviar. More expensive than silver. This is the story of how Canon turned one of the most hated products in consumer history into a trap, and got caught. To understand the trap, you need to understand the empire. Canon was founded in 1937 in Tokyo. By the 1980s, it had become one of the most trusted names in imaging technology on the planet. Cameras, copiers, lenses. The company that professionals trusted with their most important work. By 2021, Canon held 17.7% of the global printer and copier market, second only to HP. Canon Inc. reported net sales of approximately $30 billion that year. Across offices, schools, hospitals, and homes, hundreds of millions of Canon devices were running. The brand was not just successful, it was embedded. It was infrastructure. Nobody questioned Canon. Nobody needed to. Then a man in Queens tried to scan a document. The question wasn't whether Canon had made a mistake. The question was whether Canon had made a decision, and how long ago they had made it. To understand what Canon did, you need to understand the business model that made it possible. The printer industry does not make its money selling printers. It never did. A standard inkjet printer sold at retail is often priced at or below the cost of manufacturing it. Canon, HP, Epson, they absorb that loss deliberately. The printer is not the product. The printer is the delivery mechanism for the product. The product is the ink. This model has a name in business schools: razor and blade. Gillette invented it. You sell the razor cheap. You charge a premium for the blades forever. The printer industry adopted it and took it further than Gillette ever imagined. Printer ink is, by volume, one of the most expensive liquids on Earth. Not a metaphor, not an exaggeration. Consumer Reports and independent pricing analysis put branded ink cartridges at anywhere between $500 and $3,000 per liter, depending on the cartridge size and brand. The figure cited in the legal complaints filed against Canon reached as high as $2,300 per liter. For context, a standard bottle of Dom Perignon retails for around $300. That works out to roughly $400 per liter. Printer ink beats it. Beluga caviar, one of the most expensive foods in the market, runs between $8,000 and $12,000 per kilogram at retail as of 2024. Printer ink at its worst is in the same conversation. Canon's cartridges are sold in units of a few milliliters. The price per milliliter is engineered to be invisible at the point of purchase. You see $14.99 for a cartridge. You do not see $2,300 per liter printed on the box. That invisibility is not accidental. It is the architecture of the entire business. So when Canon designed a printer that refused to scan without ink, a function that requires zero ink to perform, they were not making an engineering error. They were protecting a revenue stream. The question is, how long had they known? Canon's own support community, the official forum where customers post problems and Canon representatives respond, contains records going back to at least 2015 of users reporting the exact same issue. Customers describing how their all-in-one Canon printer refused to scan when a cartridge ran dry. Customers asking why. Customers being told in various forms that this was simply how the device worked. 6 years before the lawsuit. Think about what that actually means. Canon was not surprised by David Leecraft's complaint in 2021. Canon had been reading versions of that complaint on their own support forums for half a decade. They had customer service representatives responding to it. They had engineers who understood the firmware, executives who approved the product design year after year, and they kept shipping the same printers. What they told you was that the all-in-one printer was a versatile, multifunction device. What they actually did was program it to hold its own features hostage to ink consumption. The Canon Pixma MG2522, the specific model David Leecraft purchased at Walmart, was marketed with scanning as a core advertised capability. The product listing did not say scanning available only when ink cartridges are sufficiently full. It said all-in-one. It implied all functions, all the time. The gap between what was advertised and what was delivered was not a bug. It had been documented internally for years. In October 2021, David Leecraft filed a class action complaint against Canon USA in federal court in New York. The suit alleged breach of express warranty, unjust enrichment, and violations of New York's consumer protection statutes. The complaint sought at least $5 million in damages, representing a class of more than 100 affected consumers. The legal argument was precise. Scanning does not require ink. Faxing does not require ink. These are electronic functions, light sensors, document feeders, digital transmission. The ink cartridge is irrelevant to their operation. Canon had programmed the device to check ink levels before allowing those functions to run, not because the technology required it, but because the business model demanded it. Canon's response was to fight the case. In 2023, a second plaintiff filed a separate class action complaint in federal court in New York, making nearly identical allegations. A second set of customers, a second federal filing, the same core claim. Canon all-in-one printers are falsely advertised because they disable non-printing functions when ink is low or empty. 2 lawsuits, 2 sets of plaintiffs, 1 consistent pattern. The 2021 case was ultimately dismissed, but dismissal in a class action does not mean the conduct was found acceptable. It means the specific legal theory did not survive the procedural threshold. The behavior Canon was accused of was never ruled lawful. It was never ruled ethical. The case ended on a technicality, not a verdict, and Canon kept selling the same printers. The printer industry's ink model worked for decades because consumers had no real alternative. You bought the printer. You were locked into the cartridge ecosystem. Third-party ink existed, but Canon, like HP and Epson, fought it aggressively. Firmware updates that rejected non-Canon cartridges, chip authentication systems that flagged refilled cartridges as empty, a sustained, methodical campaign to ensure that the only ink going into a Canon printer was ink Canon sold. The strategy was surgical, and for a long time, it worked. But the lawsuits changed something. Not immediately, not dramatically, but they changed the conversation. When the Leecraft complaint went public in October 2021, it was covered by NBC, Business Insider, PC Magazine, ZDNet, and dozens of technology outlets. The specific detail, that a scanner was disabled by empty ink cartridges, was the kind of story that travels. It was concrete. It was verifiable. It was something every person who had ever owned a printer could immediately understand and resent. The coverage did not just inform consumers. It validated a suspicion millions of people had carried for years without being able to articulate it. The feeling that the printer was working against them, that the low ink warning appeared too early, that the cartridge declared empty still had ink in it, that the machine was not a tool but a subscription they had never agreed to. $2,300 per liter. That number, once published, does not leave you. Canon had spent decades making the price of ink invisible. The lawsuit made it visible. And once consumers could see the number, once they could compare it to champagne, to caviar, the relationship shifted. In a way that no firmware update could reverse. The trap Canon built for its customers had become the story Canon could not escape. Canon has not collapsed. Let's be precise about that. By 2024, Canon held approximately 20% of the global printer market, ranking third worldwide, behind HP and Epson. The company reported approximately $28.5 billion in annual revenue that year, a record high. The ink model still generates profit, but the signals are accumulating. The global ink cartridge market is under structural pressure from two directions simultaneously, and both were visible by 2023. First, the rise of ink tank printers, devices that use refillable reservoirs instead of proprietary cartridges, sold at higher upfront cost but dramatically lower per-page cost. Canon itself sells ink tank models under its Pixma G Megatank series, a line that remained active and expanding through 2025. The existence of that product line is an admission. The cartridge model has a ceiling, and Canon knows it. Second, consumer trust in the printer category as a whole has eroded to a degree that is difficult to overstate. Printer satisfaction scores are among the lowest of any consumer electronics category. The phrase, "I hate my printer," is not a niche complaint. It is a cultural consensus. And Canon, through the specific conduct described in 2 federal lawsuits, contributed to that consensus in a documented, verifiable way. The 2023 case was dismissed. The 2021 case was dismissed. Canon did not pay the $5 million. Canon did not issue a recall. Canon did not change the firmware on existing devices. What Canon did was continue. And continuing, in this case, is its own kind of verdict. So, that's the story of Canon's ink trap. A man in Queens bought a $40 printer to scan documents. The scanner worked. The ink was empty. The machine refused. And in that refusal, that single, deliberate, firmware-enforced refusal, was the entire architecture of a business model that had been running for decades. Here's what this story actually teaches us. First, the price of something is only visible if someone forces you to see it. Canon did not hide the cost of ink. They fragmented it. A cartridge here, a replacement there, $14.99 at a time, forever. It took a federal lawsuit and a journalist writing $2,300 per liter in a headline for millions of people to understand what they had been paying. The most effective pricing strategies are the ones you never notice until someone makes you do the math. Second, a known problem that goes unfixed is a decision. Canon support forums documented this issue in 2015, 6 years before the lawsuit. The engineers knew, the customer service team knew, the product managers knew. Nobody changed the firmware. That is not negligence. That is a calculation. That the revenue protected by the ink lock was worth more than the customers who would complain about it. They were wrong about the second part. Third, the trap you build for your customers eventually becomes the story your customers tell about you. Canon spent decades making ink invisible. The lawsuit made it visible. And now, every time someone searches for the cost of printer ink, they find the number. $2,300 per liter. More than champagne. More than caviar. That number is now part of Canon's brand. Not because Canon put it there, but because 2 plaintiffs in New York forced it into the public record. Here's the question worth sitting with. The next time your printer tells you the ink is low, before you've printed anything that looks faded, before a single page has come out wrong, are you going to replace the cartridge? Or are you going to remember this story? Canon bet that you would replace the cartridge. For decades they were right. The question is whether they still are. If this story made you think twice about your printer, subscribe.